photography, he and his friends decide to arrange a dinner to remember the old college days. As he was starting a relationship with Jane, he decided to take her to meet his old classmates. The group of friends gets along very well with the woman, and after drinking a lot, everyone says goodbye and the couple gets in their car to head towards the apartment. As she was the only one who didn't drink, Jane takes responsibility for driving. In a moment of distraction, the girl does not realize that there was a woman crossing the street, and even trying to swerve and avoid the accident, she ends up hitting the pedestrian squarely and stopping a few meters ahead after colliding with a pole. After the impact, Jane wonders if the person is still alive and starts to take off her seatbelt to get out of the car and try to help the victim, but is stopped by her boyfriend, who is scared of being arrested for taking someone's life. He tells the girl that they should leave, convincing her to restart the car, and then leave the accident scene. A few days after the tragedy, Tun is hired to take the graduation photos of a young friend of Jane's. After taking several photos of the girl and her family members, all the graduates gather for a class photo. When aiming his camera at the crowd, Tun sees a very pale and scary female figure next to the students. Startled by the sight, he takes his eyes off the lens to see if it was real, but he doesn't see anything out of the ordinary. Believing that it was just a trick played by his brain, the man continues taking the pictures. Hours after graduation, while developing some photos in his bathroom that also served as his darkroom, Jane enters the room and, seeing her, Tun tells about her friend's graduation photos and tries to start a conversation, but is interrupted by her, as she is still very shaken by the accident and very sorry for not having helped the woman who was run over. The girl says that since the day of the accident she has not been able to sleep, apparently having several nightmares. Tun tries to calm her down, but without success. Jane appears to be very shaken, as she was the one driving. After the brief argument, she leaves the apartment, leaving her boyfriend alone. The next day, Tun goes to one of those photo development shops to pick up the graduation photographs. When looking at the final result of his work, the photographer sees that several images came out defective, with white blurs covering parts of the photographs. When complaining to the owner of the establishment about a possible problem with the developing machine, they decide to look at the negatives, which would be the films with inverted colors. It is a method used to check for errors. Looking at the negatives, they notice that the mistake was in Tun's own camera, which, frustrated by losing several photos, leaves the place annoyed. A few kilometers away, Jane arrives at her apartment and hears running water coming from the bathroom her boyfriend uses to develop the photos. The woman approaches while calling for her companion, but as she gets closer, something inside starts knocking on the door several times, stopping a few seconds later and opening it right away. Even scared, Jane slowly enters the room and sees that the sound of water was because of the tap that was open, practically flooding the room. Afraid of it being a trap and having someone behind the curtain waiting to attack her from behind, she decides to open it abruptly in order to surprise the possible intruder, but there was no one there. As everything was apparently safe, Jane goes towards the tap to turn it off, but as she approaches, a female head starts to come out of the water. The girl runs towards the door, but someone had locked it. As the rest of the creature's body starts to come out of the water, the woman despairs, trying to open the door at any cost as she calls for help, but no one comes to save her. The rest of the ghostly monster's body finishes coming out of the sink and immediately starts walking towards Jane, who slams and scratches at the door desperately. Looking back towards the creature, the girl simply wakes up. That's right, it was all just a nightmare. Later that day, the couple starts looking at the graduation photos, and in one of them in particular, Jane notices that there is a weird shadow next to one of the students. Seeing that and imagining that it could be a ghost, the girl begins to wonder if the young woman they ran over had died or if she was hospitalized in a hospital in the city. Determined to find out what happened to the person hit in the accident, Jane convinces her boyfriend to go to a kind of library that documents traffic accidents in the area. While walking around the place, the couple see a wall with several photos of accidents and decide to look for more information about a woman who was run over by the region on the day they had an accident. When they arrive at the scene, the couple is faced with a work going on the road, and when they ask a traffic agent what was happening, the man says that a few days ago a drunk driver hit the pole and then fled. The boyfriend asks if anyone was hurt, but the agent says no. Even though it's hard to believe the pedestrian wasn't injured on impact, they accept the information and start driving home, deciding to keep looking elsewhere. Along the way, Tun receives a call from a friend who was checking the entrance of people who had accidents in the city's hospitals and police stations. According to this person, there were no cases of being run over on the day they hit the pole. As they head to their apartment, the couple once again starts an argument, as Jane thinks the girl ended up dying and her ghost is haunting the photos, while Tun thinks the blurs in the photos are just camera errors and that the pedestrian is alright. Upon arriving home, Tun goes to check the negative of the photo in which the shadow of the supposed ghost appeared. Looking more intently at the image, he clearly sees the ghostly creature's face turning towards him. Frightened by that, the man starts to think that maybe it really is a ghost and decides once again to take the photos to his specialist friend, who says that it must be some lighting bug or overlay. Nearby, at a newsstand, Jane finds a magazine that had several photos of ghosts, in addition to texts dedicated to spirits. Curious about that type of content, the young woman begins to think about how it could help. And Tun is still inside his darkroom, very focused, developing some photos. The guy is very focused on his work, but loses some of his focus as soon as his girlfriend stops by his side. He greets her, trying to start a dialogue with the girl, but the phone starts to ring, interrupting the brief conversation. When answering the phone, the man is surprised to realize that it was his girlfriend who was on the phone, calling to let him know that she would be late. If his girlfriend wasn't home and was going to be arriving late, then who would have been standing next to him a few seconds ago? Desperate with the situation, Tun decides to return to the chamber to confront the entity that entered his house, but he does not find any sign of life in the apartment. He was alone. The next day, Jane decides to go with her boyfriend to the headquarters of that paranormal magazine she found at the newsstand the day before. Tun complains of a severe pain in the back of his neck that he has been experiencing since the accident. Arriving at their destination, while waiting to speak with the magazine's director, they see an employee doing an image edit, adding a false ghost to an ordinary image. Disheartened by the forgery, the couple asks the person in charge if all the photographs are fake, but the man denies it, saying that it was possible that ghosts appeared in photos of living people, usually bringing a message to one of the people in the image that has a connection with the spirit. With no more questions to ask the man, Tun returns to his work because he needs to do the photo shoot of a couple that is about to get married. In a moment when he is alone in the place after finishing the session, the lights in the place start to flash and a few seconds later, they turn off completely. To increase his fear even more, the camera he was using a few seconds ago starts taking pictures by itself in the middle of the empty room, being able to see only the flashes of light, while the man is desperate, trying to find the electrical panel to turn on the power. When he gets close to the circuit breaker, through the camera flash it is possible to see a bizarre face very close to the boy. He then switches the light back on, momentarily getting rid of the creature. As the days go by, the pain in Tun's shoulder and neck does not improve, forcing him to go to the doctor's office, reporting that he had this pain since the day of the accident and that it was getting worse and worse. Looking at the X-ray results, the doctor says that physically there is nothing wrong with the boy, even so he decides to prescribe some painkillers and anti-inflammatory drugs. Upon arriving at the hospital pharmacy to buy the medicines, Tun starts to hear voices cursing him, which makes him very scared and runs out of the hospital. He decides to pick up his girlfriend from college to spend some time together. Arriving in the classroom, he walks towards Jane. When he approaches, he notices that several amounts of blood and even the girl's teeth begin to fall on the book that was on her desk, something that makes him totally scared. But soon he is relieved, realizing that it was all a nightmare. With the fright, Tun wakes up from his sleep and decides to go to the kitchen to drink some water. While he hydrates, the man hears the front door of his house opening slowly, and when he approaches to investigate, he realizes that it was one of his college friends, named Tun. He was one of the other guys who was having dinner with the couple moments before the accident that started all this chaos. The intruder is clearly distraught, and is incessantly asking for some pictures. Not knowing what images the man is talking about and realizing that he is totally altered, Tun decides to call his former college roommate's wife, but ends up getting distracted for a second as he starts dialing the number, and Tun simply disappears in the dark. The next day, Tun starts rummaging through a photo shelf, apparently looking for something very specific. While rummaging through everything, Jane arrives at the apartment and sees on the coffee table in the living room the photographs that were taken on the day of her friend's graduation. Looking a little closer, the girl notices that all the blurs cover a specific room in the university and decides to find out what is there. Arriving at the exact place that the smudges covered, the girl comes across a kind of zoology lab with various animals and insects stored in pots. Believing that the ghost wants to convey some message, Jane begins to take pictures of different parts of the room, because knowing that the spirit appears in the images, the girl thinks that maybe the ghost wants to show something in that place. Through the corridors, the young woman takes a picture in the direction of one of the walls, and when checking the photograph, the girl clearly sees the spirit next to one of the shelves. Startled, realizing that there really was a ghost there, Jane starts to run towards the exit, but one of the paintings on the wall falls and breaks right in front of her. When she approaches the frame, she sees that one of the people in the photo was called Natra, and paying close attention, she realizes that the girl was familiar to her. Jane now understands that the pedestrian they ran over that day was actually Natra. After the shock of the discovery, Jane begins looking for more information on the woman in the college records. Checking the albums, she finds several pictures of Natra along with Tun and his friends, that is, He had some kind of relationship with this woman they ran over. A few kilometers away, the girl's boyfriend arrives at his friend Toon's house to pay a visit, intending to talk about the previous night. Arriving there, the photographer finds a real mess, and when looking for signs of his ex-colleague, Toon finds several photos from his college days on the table. The night Toon broke into the couple's apartment, it was just to look for these photos. He managed to find them while Toon called his wife. That's why the man suddenly disappeared, and the next morning the photographer couldn't find the images his friend wanted. While looking at the photographs, the young man sees something moving in the background with his peripheral vision, and when looking at the place trying to see what it was about, he sees that it was Toon on the balcony of the building about to jump and tries to draw his attention to save him, but to no avail. The friend ends up taking his own life right in front of him. Hours later, while talking to Toon's widow, the man discovers that all three friends who were at the table on the day of the accident took their own lives. From the information the woman gave, everyone complained that they were being tormented by some creature days before their deaths. After giving evidence and leaving the place, Jane goes to get her boyfriend, and after some quiet time due to grief, Toon is confronted by the girl, who shows the photo in which he and Natra appear together and asks who that woman was. Having no more options, the man tells the girl's story. Natra was a quiet, friendless college student. Out of pity, Toon ends up approaching her and even entering a relationship with her, but keeping everything a secret for fear of what others would think. It turns out that Toon's colleagues, the same ones who were at dinner, practiced a lot of bullying against the girl, who was very sad because her own boyfriend was right by her side and did absolutely nothing to defend her. Sad for the recurring situation, she arrived even trying to take her own life. After finally realizing that the spirit that was haunting him was Natries, Toon goes along with his girlfriend to visit the girl's old house, where she lived with her mother. Arriving at the place, they are greeted by the friendly lady who, as soon as they enter, says that Natra was actually sleeping upstairs because she didn't feel very well. Wanting to confirm the information, the couple takes advantage of the old woman leaving the room to make dinner and go up to the bedroom, where they come across the girl's corpse, already almost completely decomposed. After seeing the body, they sit down to talk to Natries' mother to try to convince her to cremate Natries' remains, with the intention that this can sever the spirit's ties with the land and that everyone be at peace. After a little insistence, the couple manages to convince the lady to hold the funeral and cremate their daughter's body. More relaxed, they return home and lie down with the intention of getting a good night's sleep, but in the middle of the night, close to 3 a.m. to be exact, Toon wakes up feeling watched. Believing it was just in his head, he decides to turn to the other side and cover himself and go back to sleep. But while his eyes are closed, his blanket starts to be slowly pulled. Already imagining what would happen, the man slowly looks down and sees Natries' spirit on the floor watching him in a frightening way and trying to reach him on top of the bed. When the ghost is very close to fulfilling its objective, for some reason it just disappears. Toon starts looking around the room, and looking to his side, where Jane was lying, he finds the demonic creature watching him very closely. Afraid to stay in the room and end up being cornered, the man gets up and goes out of the apartment. He runs to the elevator as Natries' spirit walks across the ceiling towards him. As there would be no time for the elevator to arrive, Toon runs to the emergency stairs and starts to descend to the first floor, but it seems that he is trapped in some kind of illusion, because even though he goes down several flights of stairs, he is always on the 4th floor. He runs desperately and ends up falling down the stairs. Upon getting up, he finds Jane near the door, asking why he had left her behind. Thinking about leaving the building with his girlfriend, Toon holds her by the arms, and then realizes that the young woman's wrists are cut, making him realize that that was not Jane but the ghost of Natra, who is still trying to hold him. In order not to get caught, Toon goes out the window and starts down the building's fire escape, while the girl's spirit pursues him in a totally bizarre way. The young man ends up falling from a great height, injuring himself badly and fainting instantly. As soon as he regains consciousness the next day, already in the hospital, Jane gives him the news that Natries' remains will be cremated, and even though he is badly injured, the young man decides to go to the ceremony, where he watches the fire, believing that his nightmare was finally over. A few weeks later, Jane goes to that shop that specializes in developing photographs to pick up some pictures the couple took on the beach while on vacation. Along with these images, the girl also finds some photographs of the couple that were taken on the day that Toon told about his relationship with Natra. As she delivered the entire roll of film that was in the device, these photos were also developed along with those taken on the beach. Upon arriving home, Jane manages to arrange the images in the correct order, and when checking the sequence, she can see in the corner of the room Natries' spirit standing up and pointing to a specific part of her boyfriend's photo collection. Searching the place where the entity was pointing, the girl finds a roll of film inside the envelope. Upon developing the photographs, she is horrified by what she finds, The person who was in those images was Natra, crying and screaming while receiving horrible and brutal attacks. As Tun enters the darkroom, the couple starts an argument, causing the photographer to finally tell the real reason why the spirit is seeking revenge. It all happened a few years ago, while Tun was still in college. One day, Natra was in that room with the animals stored in jars, when suddenly the boy's friends enter the place and start to provoke the girl, who defends herself by hitting one of the jars on the head of one of the boys. As a reaction, the group holds the young girl to the ground, while Tun does horrible things to her. During that disturbing situation, Tun arrives at the scene and is shocked to see the girl who was until then his girlfriend, being the target of that kind of violence by his own friends. Being pressured by Tun, instead of helping her, the young photographer just takes pictures of the girl, who desperately asks for her boyfriend's help. After that, Natra drops out of college and returns to her mother's house, where she ends up taking her own life not long after. So on the day of the accident, what they ran over was actually the young woman's spirit. That's why the traffic agent said that no one had been hurt in the collision with the pole, and that's also why they didn't find any hit-and-run victim records that day. Completely devastated by Tun's attitude, his girlfriend decides to go home, possibly ending the relationship. Alone in the apartment, he begins to confront Natri's spirit, ordering her to appear. The man starts taking several pictures around the house in an attempt to find out where the ghost was, but to no avail. Frustrated at not finding the spirit, Tun throws the camera away and it lands facing him. When hitting the ground, the camera is triggered by the impact, taking one last photograph. Afraid of what he might find, the man slowly approaches and takes the photo. When he looks at the picture, Tun finally understands the reason for the pain in the back of his neck and shoulders. In the photograph, it is possible to clearly see the spirit of Natra sitting on top of the boy. The creature was on top of him the entire time. As a way to finally complete his revenge, the ghost begins to unbalance Tun's body, causing him to fall from his apartment on the 4th floor. Even with the fall of more than 10 meters, the photographer still survives, but with serious consequences. A few days after the accident, Jane goes to visit Tun. When she enters the room, we can see from the reflection in the glass in the door that even after all, Natri's spirit is still on the man's shoulders.